how to help a child with perfectionism. If you have kids and if they're artsy fartsy, they're creative, they love to write, or they just put all their effort into things, you may experience this. Your child brings you a picture and they're in tears because it didn't turn out the way that they wanted it to go. Perfection is one of those things that's what we're talking about in this video. By the end, I'm going to give you some strategy so that you can help your kids embrace the journey of creativity and not be chained down, hindered, frustrated, or broken because things aren't working the way that they planned. Now, I have 5 sons, and some of them are actually, they're all extremely creative in their own way, and they're perfectionists. You want to see an example? This is something that frustrated my son. He made it, and he didn't like it because you could see the stuffing through the bottom. What? Okay, another one. This is his very first oil painting, another son, okay? Takes a class, very first oil painting. Are you kidding me? So I know about having perfectionist kids. And it can be a challenge because they're putting their heart and their effort into something. They want it to be phantasmagoric, and it doesn't turn out like what they imagined in their mind. So how do we help our kids when they have that flair or that bend towards being a perfectionist? Well, there are tips and tricks to help you. The first thing is to let them know that for you to understand and for us to teach our kids that striving to do excellent work is an amazing virtue. It's amazing and it's commendable, but it's not attainable for us to be perfect in any way, shape, or form. Not on social media, not in our house, not with our training of our kids, not in homeschool, and certainly not with arts and crafts and things that require a do and show type thing. But striving towards greatness is a good character quality. So we want to be speaking that over our kids all the time. But we also need to teach them to be flexible. And I did not learn this lesson until I had 5 kids. I was 15 or 20 years into homeschooling, and I had already kind of brushed aside kids that were struggling with this bent on perfectionism. One of my kids is extremely artistic. Well, 2 of them are extremely artistic. One of them, everything that he touched was golden when he was little. And it didn't matter what it was, whether it was a performance where he would stand in front of a crowd, or if he was doing some kind of art where it was drawing or painting or writing. The kid just excelled at everything, so much so that we called him the Renaissance man because everything he touched, he just excelled at. Hi, Ginger. You make a stuffed dolphin out of a sock. Yay! Very, very cool. So crafty things are super important. But as my son was progressing in his life, he would hit the wall. Things wouldn't turn out the way that he wanted to. And it was really challenging to keep him motivated to move forward. Fast forward a few more years, I'm sitting with my crocheting son, and last child, super busy. I taught him how to crochet when he was 4 because in our homeschool environment, he was driving his older brothers crazy. So with boys, all you have to say is, I bet you can't. And then they do, or at least that's how it works in my house. So I taught him how to do a chain stitch crochet, and I challenged him to make the world's longest chain, which of course he turned into a 75-foot or 100-foot yard chain as we're doing read aloud and history together as a family. It was a quiet thing for him to do, and it kept that kinetic side of his brain really busy. As he got a little bit better, I taught him how to put on rows, and I taught him, he eventually started to make an Afghan. And then during COVID, he started to pump out things like this in prolific fashion. We have bins and bins and bins of things that he would look and he would do. But then he would be so frustrated that the quality wasn't that great. So I remember sitting next to him and we were learning how to crochet. I think I had pulled up, I was teaching myself how to knit, and he was working on some crochet thing. I think he was crocheting a pair of slippers because he thought crocheted slippers would be really cool. And it dawned on me, I get it. This is the secret. And it's a lesson from our ancestors. Does anybody know what it is? A good old fashioned sampler. Way back in the day, specifically, and take this just the way that it was, little girls would learn how to sew and embroider by having a small piece of material, and the whole point of the sampler was to do it and to rip it out, to do it and to rip it out, to do it and to rip it out. And I remember sitting with my son and I remember saying, we're going to start perfecting your stitches, but we're going to do them by embracing the sampler. And what that meant was you're going to do something and then you're going to rip it out. In crocheting, it's called frogging. So you put something together and you pull it and you make the sound, rip it, and you pull it apart. For our perfectionist kids, if we can get them to embrace the idea of a sampler, we will help them move past that hurdle in their mind that it has to be perfect. Because when they're sitting and they're practicing their crochet stitches or their penmanship or their painting or their math or writing, the whole purpose is for them to do it and then to pull it apart, to paint it and then to paint it again and to paint it again and to paint it again. The point is not perfection. The point is practice, right? Practice makes permanent. How does this translate into academics? Well, if you're going to teach your kids to be mathematicians, scientists, writers, historians, they're going to need some fundamental skills. Just take writing for an example. Nobody, well, except for somebody like maybe Brandon Sanderson, that's like all over the internet right now, nobody sits down and writes a perfect draft of anything. It has to go through a process. You have to think about an idea. You need to brainstorm and build a vocabulary bank. You need to map out where your writing is going. Then you need to dump out a really bad draft, let it sit, and come back and look at it and make tweaks and edits and revisions, etc., until it's polished and perfected. That whole idea of a draft is frustrating for a perfectionist because they sit down at a piece of paper or a keyboard and they want it to be perfect right from the get-go. But that's not the point. The point is this idea of the sampler. The point is the practice. So how does this work with art? That's an easy one, right? Instead of making big paintings, you break down into smaller canvases or pieces of paper, scrap paper, maybe they're even teeny tiny, and you practice one thing over and over and over. If you're going to draw a chameleon, you might draw 12 chameleons on small pieces of paper. If you're going to draw a dragon or a house, you draw 12 of them. And then you can sit back and you teach your child to look at all 12 of those things and to evaluate them. I pressed too hard on the pen here. Oh, the way that the tail curved That wasn't quite what I was looking for, but I really like that. I love this one. I don't like that one. Can I explain why? And so you're teaching your child through the power of a sampler to evaluate their work in a objective way rather than an emotional way. It's powerful and it's so freeing for a perfectionist to do something for the state of just for the purpose of practicing and perfecting. Look up on YouTube somewhere. There is a guy that is a master calligrapher, and he does like beautiful. I think he works at when the last time I saw him, worked at the White House or something, hand doing calligraphy. And just look at the calligraphy. But he talks about the thousands of hours that he put in practicing and doing samples so that he could perfect his craft. If you have a musician in the house, one of my kids is a guitarist, and he's a gifted guitarist, and if you hear him play, you'll be like, "Oh, he's amazing." But do you know why he's amazing? Because no lie, he practices no less than an hour a day. But when he was first starting, back when he was 12, we're homeschoolers. He would practice 2 to 4 hours a day because he loved it and he was perfecting his craft. Amazing when you embrace the art of practice for the sake of progress rather than striving for perfection. This is not what we want our kids to achieve. So now, if you take a piece of handwriting or math and you have a perfectionist child that's frustrated that their numbers aren't neat or perfect, that their letters are messy or not quite the way that they want, switch the tables on them. Take that piece of paper and circle everything on the page that's correct. Circle everything that's right. Circle everything that's good. You're going to destroy that piece of paper because most of what's on the paper is good. Your perfectionist is focusing on that one letter or that those two problems that aren't perfect. But if you can swarm their head with, look at how much that you did that's amazing, then you're embracing this whole idea of practice. Look, you got 92% of this correct. That's amazing. Let's pull out that other 8% and let's see if we can do it a different way. Practice, sampler. Okay. This is so important because kids today, as a general stereotypical rule, don't have stamina. They need to know that their life is not like Amazon Prime. It doesn't happen today. Growth and progress takes time. And we need to teach them that it is okay to give yourself space and time to perfect whatever it is that you're working on. So, as I wrap this up, I want you to understand that perfectionism is is not necessarily a bad thing if you're striving for greatness, because we want the bar up here for our kids, right? We want them to have to take a running leap to get over the bar to succeed. And that's a good thing. And we want it just slightly out of reach so that they're constantly growing, they're constantly striving. So important that we do that. But when they fall or when they fail, when the pen doesn't do what it's supposed to do, we need to take a page from Bob Ross. Remember the old guy, the painter? There's no such thing as a mistake. There's just happy little accidents. Our kids need to understand that the progress that happens by practicing is so important. There's no such thing as mistakes. There's happy little accidents. So your drawing didn't turn out the way that you want. I mean, look at my Bob Ross drawing, right? That's not perfection, but it's a practice of a doodle to help grab attention. But I'm not going to beat myself up over the fact that it doesn't look exactly like Bob Ross, or that look at my, if I was a perfectionist kid, which I was, um, I would have erased and fixed this question mark quite a few times because it didn't turn out right. It's squiggly. Our kids need to understand that practice is okay and that writing and art and building and sewing and singing and dancing and driving and cooking and laundry and sewing, all these things take practice. When I sat down with my youngest son, I think it was 2 years ago, and we did the tea time with mom where we would watercolor because it was a season in life where it was just he and I at the table. And both of us would work on a watercolor image together. And he's this guy. He's one of my perfectionist kids. So as we're painting, he would peek over and he'd look at mine and then he'd look at his and he'd go, and I constantly had to remind him, dude, I'm 3 decades ahead of you, or I'm 4 decades ahead of you in practice. I've been drawing and painting for a long time. You're more gifted than I am. You just don't have the same amount of time in practicing. So embrace the idea of a sampler. Embrace the idea of not perfectionism, but practice leading to progress. Embrace processes like the writing process. Encourage your kids to write rough drafts and bad drafts and terrible spelling and terrible mechanics. Have them try to draw as fast as they can 12 times and see which one turns out the best. Have them on your mark, get set, go. Do your math drills as fast as you can. And how many can you miss? Have them paint the same picture 12 times so that they're embracing this idea of progress. At the end of the day, when our kids leave home and they sail off into the sunset to do whatever it is that they're going to do, wouldn't it be better if they have achieved amazing things, not because they're covered in pixie dust and gold powder, but because they've put in thousands of hours of practicing and perfecting something. So that when people look at them and they say, "Wow, you're talented," or "Wow, you're so lucky that you can do that," they'll be able to look them in the eyes and say, "I'm not lucky. I'm not talented. I just invested more time into practice than other people did around me. And it doesn't make me great. It makes me persistent." So, and persistence and practice and progress are what is going to help your kids find success and hold on to it in the future without being arrogant, right? Because we don't want to raise kids that are arrogant. We want them to be humble, but confident, knowing that if I'm willing to put in the time and the effort, and if I'm teachable and I will listen, there's really very little that I can't achieve. So before I wind this up, let's see. So I don't see any questions. I'm so glad you're finding this helpful. Don't worry about misspellings, even in comments on any of my channels, because we don't strive for perfection. We're real, right? And we embrace this journey of homeschooling our kids together, and we're here to encourage each other. So today's message, when you're trying to find how to help a child with perfectionism, is to embrace high standards, to be flexible, to use the power of the sampler and processes, and to embrace the methodology of Bob Ross. There's no such thing as accidents or mistakes. They're just happy little accidents. Hey guys, have a wonderful day. I will see you in the next video. Oh, and in the links below, there will be a link. This son created a little beginning crocheters class. And one of the lessons in there about the chain stitch is unlocked so that you can see that part for free. Super great if you wanted to get your kids starting this fine motor activity of learning how to crochet. So anyway, have a great day and I'll see you soon. Bye.